Namaste. Good morning, everyone. Shakti here, a little bit late. A little bit late, but hey, it's my birthday today, so I'm just going with my flow. Welcome to day nine, of my road to Rapture, as I tell the story of how I came to write this book, Rapture, A Guide to Sexual and Spiritual Awakening for Women, and also recount my own personal journey of sexual and spiritual awakening and opening. That is the background to this book, really, the last 18 years of my life and work. So hi, and thank you for being here with me this morning on my birthday. I'm actually, and it's really interesting, you know, everything is connected. I'm actually staying at my father's house, and hence the very, how would you describe this wallpaper? Old people wallpaper behind me. And I'm also, and this is quite touching, and today is going to be quite touching, I feel. Maybe that's because I already feel touched, you know. I'm actually sitting in the room where my mum died in May 2020. And I'm sitting in the room where her ashes are, like literally on the table right in front of me. And all the cards from her funeral. My dad's kind of kept this room as a sort of a shrine in a way to mum. And so I'm sitting here in the room that she died on my birthday with her ashes just right opposite me. So it feels really, you know, if this wasn't planned, I'm here because my dad had an accident, and so the cosmic weave of events have brought me here today. And what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to be speaking of something fairly deep and touching upon the personal and ancestral shadows within me, my family, but also just for the feminine through the ages today. And so, you know, there's a cosmic wisdom to all of this. So yeah, my book, 18 years of my life, work and journey of sexual and spiritual awakening. I've been, you know, this has been my work for many years to share these teachings with women, and there is a course that goes along with the book. With the course and the book were co-created, actually, in some ways. And there's one thing that I want to say before I go into more of today's sharing, which is that, you know, when I'm asked to summarize this, I summarize it sometimes by saying this talks about my journey from sexless single mom to sacred sexual priestess. And that is true. And it was a huge, and is still a huge, unfolding and exploration and expansion of my being, my pleasure, my ecstasy, my awareness, right? But if you just hone in on the word sex, you're going to miss a lot of what this is actually about. And as you'll have already recognized if you've been following these lives, is that sex is not something that happens in isolation from anything else, and it is affected by everything else, and it affects everything else in our lives. So the fact that I was, for example, the sexless single mother wasn't anything to do with sex, but it was to do with my wounds, my traumas, my triggers, my lack of awareness, my lack of sovereignty, my inability to communicate consciously, my out of touchness with the truth of what was happening within me, and my inability to translate that into conscious communication with my partner, right? So sex brings us into relationship with another or with others. But it's never just about that physical act. It's about all those other aspects of our being that then come online and are part of that interaction, even if it's just for one night. And so sex is about the all of you, you know, the chapter, what chapter is it in my book? I think it's chapter 2 or 3. Oh, actually, no, it's chapter 8 is sex is for the all of you. So how good sex is about the all of you. It's not just about a physical act. And if sex is good, then all of you is going to blossom and benefit, right? That's how it works. So depending upon the perspective that I take, that you take as you listen to these lives and as I share, you know, you can take the perspective that in those intense 10 years of exploration and expansion that I've spoken to in the last couple of lives, you could see that as being, excuse me, I've still got a really hoarse voice after COVID. You could see this as like, you know, the unfolding of this wild, sensual, empowered, ecstatic woman, right? You could interpret it that way, who's kind of losing all these chains of the patriarchy and discovering herself. That's one interpretation that you could put upon it. Another interpretation you could put upon it is this constant cycling through shadows, through trauma, through triggers, through the dark, constant dark nights of the soul, right? That's another way you could interpret it. Well, the reality is that it was always both, everything and more. And, you know, maybe I'm just a very slow learner. But what that experience for me of the light and the dark, the heaven and the hell, what that at some point began to teach me was a very deep tantric principle, very simple, but like to actually realize it rather than to know it is a completely different thing. Which that we live in a world of duality. We live in a world of duality. So there's always these opposites of experience and of beingness, right? And often we get trapped in one or other end of that polarity or that duality. And so long as we are in duality and living from duality, we are going to suffer. There's going to be pain. And the tantric way is an approach to moving beyond duality and coming into third eye unity consciousness, right? And the dawning recognition that there is ecstasy in pain, there is pain in ecstasy, same, no difference. To losing attachment to identification with our human experiences to a certain degree. So this recognition was beginning to dawn for me. You know, to like something that I'd read in books and I'd heard teachers speak about, and I could do meditations to have that momentary experience of bliss, unification, oneness, whatever my state, whatever was happening in my life. But then I would go back and get lost in duality again, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I still do it now, right? So I'm not a guru, I'm not a perfect goddess or whatever. But in today's story, sex magic, twin flames, and Kali's cosmic slap is going to take us into some dark before coming out to the light. So it was about 2016, and I am looking at my notes a little bit, but I just like to ad-lib. I think it flows much more authentically that way. I created a vision board, something I used to do pretty much every year around New Year. I love creating vision boards. And as is usual, posting all the things on there with pictures of what I wanted to create and manifest in my life that year. So key for me, as always, really is travel. And I listed the particular countries that I wanted to go to. Australia, Bali. Well, those are the two that stick in my mind. There were others. But those were the two countries I wanted. Oh, Thailand was in there. I'd already just been to Thailand that year. Anyway, so countries and travel. And I also, I was just cutting out from magazines, right? I also found this picture of a beach. I didn't know where this beach was or anything, but it was just like my paradise beach. And that was on my vision board as well. So I created this vision board, and at this point also having, you know, been in this immersive path for so many years, immersed in the polarity of masculine and feminine, of teaching and studying authentic relationship, of the recognition of the potential for inner divine union and sacred union between masculine and feminine, I had this deep longing to manifest in my life a tantric, conscious, committed relationship, and to have that experience of sacred union within and without. And there was one more thing. I really wanted to complete my book. So I'd been writing a lot and it was doing really well, but I was finding it very hard to complete the book whilst parenting, whilst taking care of the home, and whilst working. And I really had this longing to have an uninterrupted spell of time to write, just focus on writing, which is what I love to do, right? So this was the context. So not long after I had been in a 1-month lovership with somebody, a wizard, you know, one of my many crazy cosmic experiences, I decided to do some sex magic. And this came in conjunction with, I was part of a Channel 4 documentary on super orgasm. And what we had to do as part of that was, we were in the documentary, but also we had to do a scientific test, which was to self-pleasure, to orgasm, and take a saliva test, which would test certain hormone levels. And I can't remember what else they were testing for in our saliva, but it was testing for something. So we had to do this. And I thought, okay, great. I'm going to combine sex magic ritual with doing the saliva test, you know, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I got ready, created the sacred space. Remember, by now I was initiated as a priestess of Rhiannon, goddess of love and sacred sexuality. And by now I had also formed, through my work in teaching Dancing the Goddess and my ongoing depth of, you know, exploration of the Tantra Yoga goddesses and the divine feminine, I had this relationship with Kali, with Isis, and with Mary Magdalene. And so I did an invocation, you know, a very powerful invocation where I called in the assistance of these goddesses to bring me my twin flame, to bring me my divine complement. Now, I commanded it. And then I went into a sex magic ritual, which simply put is, you know, there are many ways to do it. There's no right or wrong way that I'm going to tell you anyway. The way I did it was to create a ritual of self-honoring and self-pleasuring, and then to include in that process and practice the visualization and the holding of the image and the calling forth of that which I desired. Included in that vision of what I desired was all of those things on my vision board. And I specified in great detail the qualities of the man that I wanted to call in. And here are some very specific things. He had to be tantric. He had to be a meditator. And I wanted him to be, I know this is kind of funny now, but I wanted him to be a filmmaker. One of the other things that I'd been doing for a while at that point was to be interviewing light workers, leaders, spiritual teachers, inspirational people from the world of Tantra, yoga, spirituality. And I wanted to develop this because it was something I really loved to do, and wanted to develop those interviews and make it bigger. And I felt the perfect complement to that would be to have a partner who was a filmmaker, right? So I was very specific in my desire. The day after that ritual, literally the day after that ritual, this man messaged me out of the blue. I didn't know him. We weren't friends on Facebook. I think we did have some friends in common. I didn't know who he was. And approached me in a very humble, devotional, respectful way. Turns out he lived in Australia and was a sannyas. Another you know, a spiritual seeker, a follower of Osho. Remember, my journey was begun in a way with a relationship with a sannyas. So this felt like I couldn't believe it. I had to pinch myself. This guy had approached me out of nowhere. We began to communicate. We began to video call. And very quickly, this very deep connection blossomed. And it just seemed predestined. It seemed like my prayers had been answered because he was everything that I had written down, that I had invoked. And I couldn't believe it. It was mind-blowing. And then I was telling him about my book, Rapture, and he said, why don't you come and stay with me? Why don't you come and stay with me? I will accommodate you. I will take care of you. Come and finish your book. And I was like, I can't believe this. Surely, like, wow. You know, wow. And he came to visit me in London. And then within about 3 months of knowing one another, I flew to Australia to join him there for a month to finish writing my book. And to, by this time, you know, we were lovers, we were a couple. Guess what? The next day, or maybe even that day, we went for a walk on the beach. It was the beach that was on my vision board. It was that beach. Wow. You know, this all seems completely magical, doesn't it? It seems completely unbelievable. Literally like having to keep pinching myself. When am I going to wake up from this dream? Well, that's a good question, actually. Flowers strewn all the way up from the car to the bed. You know, magical, tantric, deep love, complete heart opening, complete sense of oneness and meant to be. All my dreams come true. Creating projects together exactly as I had envisaged. Incredible. More dreams coming true. And I finished the book. But it isn't the one that's between these pages. But I did finish the first rendition of Rapture. As I was writing, it was quite a cathartic process because I was writing it in the format I spoke about yesterday, where each chapter was an exploration of an encounter that I'd had sexually and what that had taught me and how that had opened me, the lessons, the gifts of that encounter. So that was the framework, but it was very cathartic because as I was writing, of course, then there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of heartache, there was a lot of seeing of my shadow. So there was this process of catharsis as I wrote, and it was sometimes, well, not actually for me, but it was for him a bit of a strange thing for me to be writing about all of my past lovers while being in this love relationship with him. After about a month, well, I decided to stay for another month, but there were already some cracks, and there were already, in fact, there had already been some red flags at the very beginning that I had completely overridden in my eagerness to find within this situation the fantasy that I had projected out into the world. And I'm going to cut a very long story and a very painful story short and just come to the point where within 3 or 4 months, I guess, within 3 or 4 months, I was isolated from my friends, cut off from my work, given all my power away, confused, lost, hopeless, sometimes suicidal, traumatized. Yeah. So this heaven had become a hell. And all the tools, all the techniques that I knew, that I had studied, that I had put, the last 10 years before that into learning, becoming, embodying. I would be doing my utmost to bring these tools and techniques into this situation for positive change, for healing, for reconnection. And it just seemed to make everything even worse. Because everything that I tried just set off an explosion of rage and aggression in him, which further traumatized me. I didn't know, I'd never, again, there's an innocence and a naivety to me that is still here, even as I am 57 today. I don't think that innocence is ever going to go, and I love that about me. I'd never heard of narcissistic abuse. I'd never heard of that phrase, narcissism, apart from when I read Narcissus und Goldmund, a book, a literature book, but yeah, that was a long time ago. So I didn't at first understand what this was. I only came to see in hindsight that this is what was going on. But after about 8 months, I think it was, 8 or 9 months of being in this situation, luckily for me, something catalyzed my rage. Luckily, something catalyzed my rage. And by the way, I think it's also important to say that this relationship I had pasted all over Facebook, in terms of the Tantra teacher who had finally found her twin flame, and many people were following and celebrating and seeing me as the inspiration for what they dreamt of experiencing themselves. Some people were envious. It did look that way from the outside for a while. So can you imagine the shame that I felt? It was huge. Anyway, one day my rage was activated, finally. It took a lot to get to that point. Wow, how much I was willing to suffer and be completely lost in the darkness. My rage was activated, and in that rage I found the power to say no, and in that rage I found the power to end it. Which doesn't mean actually that it was an instant and sudden cutting off, because then there was, for me and for him, the challenge and the difficulty of disentangling from a very karmic, codependent, energetically merged relationship. So it was difficult for me. I found it really hard to let go, because he had become, like I said in my live yesterday or the day before, my God, my everything. Without him, I felt empty and alone and afraid. So, but then finally I realized, as I began to seek help and understand what was going on, that I understood then this dynamic of narcissistic abuse and codependency. Right? So I had to acknowledge my codependency and my love addiction. I can't tell you how ashamed I felt to have broadcast this into the world and then for this to manifest. I thought nobody is going to trust me ever again. Nobody is going to want to work with me ever again. And I was judging myself. How can you? And this is what he used to say to me. So he was a perfect reflection of my subconscious self-hatred. He used to say to me, how can you be a teacher of this? And that's what I was saying to myself, right? finally I found the courage to do a hard cutting off, no contact, which is what has to happen. So many cords cut, so many processes to clear my body and my womb of that energy, which was very, very dark. Almost like a possession, actually. Almost like a spirit possession. And then I was left alone, feeling small, feeling broken, feeling hopeless, feeling useless, and having to face myself in that. Oop, phone's just put a message up. I just have to read this message and see what it says. Okay, let's get rid of that. We're still live. And so, you know, this was Kali's cosmic karmic slap, a phrase that Shashi Saluna shared with me the other day. The karmic slap. And of course, having invoked this situation with the power of Kali, who is an almighty fucking powerhouse of ego-slaying truth, having invoked this situation with her, of course, in my processing of this situation, I understood the message from her. Don't ever fuck with me again. Don't ever use me to fulfill your egoic desires. Look at yourself. There is no way out now, and you must go inside. There is no way out. You've tried everything else. You've tried all these sexual liaisons. You've tried all these moments of ecstasy. You've tried all this. You've tried giving your heart away to these unavailable men again and again. You've tried all of that. You've tried to be perfect. You've tried to be the people pleaser. None of it has worked. Go and sit with your shit and your darkness and face it. Okay. Kali's karmic slap. It's great to be able to laugh about it now. And that's really sweet. I was just looking across at a picture of my mum. Bless you, mum. You know, like, because I had been carrying for her and I don't know how many other ancestors this fucking indoctrination of I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I don't recognize my majesty. I don't recognize my beauty. I don't recognize the gold within me. I still really, of course, because otherwise this wouldn't have happened, didn't recognize the power of my sexual energy to create and to destroy, to call in and to push away this power that is here within my body and everybody, every woman's body. This power, if only I knew, if only you knew how powerful you are, if only I'd known how powerful I am. And I recognize that I still have much to discover in the realm of my power. It's not over, right? Whew, yeah, so a lot of humility. Can you imagine how humbling that experience was? Down on my knees in front of the world. I've been very public with my journey. There was nothing that I could hide. Well, not that I would choose to, but there is that unconscious impulse of like, oh my God, like, how can I let myself be seen by the world in this? How? Have to let all that go, That's not my responsibility. So I had to turn in. My commitment was to celibacy and meditation. Celibacy and meditation. To go in, to commit myself to self-love, Oh, I'm really feeling my mum right now. Bless you, mum. Yep. I was carrying her burden for a long time, and I'm just feeling that now. I had to go in and commit myself to self-love. Come what may, nothing else mattered. Meditate, celibate. Meditate, celibate. Meditate, celibate. Yeah, I'm just feeling all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot to feel, and my heart is able to feel it all. And that is really beautiful. To be so open, to all of life, to be open to my pain, to be open to my shadow, to be open to my wounds, to be open to my ignorance, to be open to my blindness, to be open to my mother's pain, her mother's pain, all women's pain, to be open to that, equally in the heart at the same time as loving life, loving bliss, loving this body, loving every sensation, you know, and this is what finally, and I don't want to sugarcoat this, right? But there was eventually, after at least a year, and throughout that process of humble inner return, with support and seeking and all the rest of it, a new shift, a new dawning, a new birth, a depth, a deepening, an enrichening, a becoming of more of the real me, more of who I am here to be. So, you know, I was on a call with my Awakening Shakti group yesterday, and one of the ladies who is of a different nationality, she said, when I hear the word rapture, I always misunderstand it, and I have this image in my head of this action of pulling apart or separating or breaking. And I said, no, in English it's rapture with an A and then rupture with a U. And then I realized, this is deeper than that. She's actually speaking a truth. She's actually picking up on a truth here. Because in that ecstasy, in that opening to life, to the force of life, which is Shakti, right? We are destroyed in a way, and we are made new. And we can resist that process, or we can open our hearts and our bodies and our souls and just dive in and go, okay, take me. And so from this rupture, a massive fucking one, I evolved, I shifted, I deepened in love. So there came the gift, you know, there came the blessing. And I'm not sugarcoating it. There's always more deepening, there's always more growth, there's always still shadows to see, there's always still days, moments, hours, minutes of darkness. But, like I was saying at the beginning, my understanding, my embodied understanding of the nature of duality and my capacity to be in the center of it all now, which is the tantric path, has also deepened. My capacity to hold space, to facilitate, to heal, to channel has deepened in this letting go. And that massive karmic slap and subsequent healing and deep dive within. Right? So actually, everything went a layer and a level deeper. Now, I don't want to idealize pain and suffering in any way. I just want to stand for truth and authenticity. And the work, the journeys that I've been on in the last few years and that I'm still journeying with now are about the deepest embrace in my inner space of all that I am in every facet of my being, and the reunification of that with the Absolute. So it's a deep inner tantra. And also, and this pertains to what's going on in the world right now as well, so much, a deeper recognition that I do have a choice as to where I put my focus. Now, I know we keep saying this in the New Age world, but, and again, this relates to personally as well as politically right now, we choose where to put our focus. We can choose to continue to wallow in the shadows and the darkness, or we can choose to reorientate our vision, our gaze, our alignment, and our path. Not to bypass, not to ignore. The integration must always, always, always happen. So nothing is left out, nothing is left behind, nothing is ignored or repressed. But my discovery in the last few years especially is that whatever is arising, whatever its flavor, anywhere on the spectrum, when I truly meet it and I go into that place of that inner union, it is ecstatic, it is rapturous, it is a turn on, actually, literally a turn on when I truly meet it within. So there has been this deeper realization as a result of all of this karmic tumult. So, thank you for bearing witness to this sharing. Thank you. My book, Rapture, is going on sale on Amazon on October the 9th. There'll be a book launch event all day. Free classes, special guests, book readings, prizes. You're very welcome. I'll post the link below. I also teach a course that runs in conjunction with the teachings in this book, allowing you to go a lot deeper and to be held all the way through your journey. It starts on October the 28th. Again, I'll put the details below. And if you feel called to journey with me on a one-to-one basis, if anything that I've shared has touched you, triggered you, brought something to your awareness, then I offer a one-to-one space. So do reach out. Thank you so much. I can hear my dad calling down the stairs, so I'm going to go now and take care of us both. So lots of love, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on my birthday. And I'll see you tomorrow when I'm going to talk about the first edition of the book and what happened next. Lots of love. Namaste, everyone.